Get ready for a hair-raising journey into the unknown. Broken Wolf tells the story of a woman caught up in an ancient tradition, a deadly secret, and a love that could save her or destroy her. This is Broken Wolf EP3. Thank you very much for your subscription and likes. You can leave your comments in the comment section. 19. Leila had done everything to try to get out of the car on the journey back to the pack, but no matter what she did, Hunter was always one step ahead of her. Currently, she was sat slumped against her seat with angry tears filling her eyes. She just couldn't grasp the idea that it was in fact her mate that was trying to ruin her life, and not her brother who she had always had conflict with. "I'm sorry about this, Leila, but this is what's best," Isabella whispers nervously, not knowing how she will take it, but Leila doesn't say anything, so Isabella reaches out to place a comforting hand on Leila's knee, but Hunter shoots his hand out to grab Isabella's wrist and forces back towards her own body. "No, we're not sorry," Hunter growls with blazing, angry eyes while Isabella shrinks away from him. "I refuse to say sorry for saving her life," he says, aiming at Isabella but still looking at now innocent, scared-looking sister. "He's had plenty of chances to hurt me but never did," Leila mumbles, rolling her eyes, thinking this was just Hunter wanting to make her miserable. "Don't you get it, you silly little girl? He needs you, he needs your position in society to destroy me. To destroy us, and then when you've lost your use he will discard of you," Hunter yells, suddenly making the driver swerve slightly. "Hunter, she wasn't to know," Isabella says, shaking her head angrily at him, but still places one of small hands on the top of his legs to help calm him down. "Know what?" Leila asks, narrowing her eyes, looking from one of them to the other then back again. She won't believe it. She already believes the story he spinned for her about being kicked out of the pack, he replies, rolling his eyes. "I don't particularly want to bring it up, but she needs to hear our version of events, then she can decide what she believes," Isabella says, taking a shaky breath just at the thought of talking about it. "I am here, you know," Leila shouts angrily, making both Isabella and Hunter snap their necks quickly towards her. It was as if they had both forgotten she was there. "Tell her then. I wipe my hands of this whole thing," he spits, holding his hands up in defense. "Tell me what?" she says, trying to control her anger. Their lack of self-control was clearly through genetics. "Not now, it's late and this will take a while to tell. I will tell you tomorrow, I promise," Isabella nods. Of course she didn't want to tell Leila anything, but she had forced herself to say "I promise," because promises were important to Isabella and only under extreme circumstances would she break them. Luckily they had just got to the house, so they didn't have to stay in that hostile environment for a minute long. Leila got out and stormed off. Hunter followed soon after to go his office, leaving Isabella to go to bed alone. Despite tossing and turning by 4 a.m., Isabella was wide awake, and there was little chance of her being able to go back to sleep with Hunter snoring softly at the side of her, something she hadn't realized he did. Isabella lay there for an hour, willing herself to go back to sleep, but gave up, thinking that it wasn't worth wasting the time she had lay in bed trying to get back to sleep when she knew it wouldn't happen. Deciding it was going to wake Hunter up to get a shower, Isabella crept around the room, got dressed and went downstairs. There was already a large amount of people up and ready in the pack. Isabella hadn't expected it to be empty when she went downstairs, but there must have been at least 50 wandering around the grounds. There was around 20 people getting to go on a run, another 20 training in pairs around the land near the pack house, and the rest were either having breakfast, cleaning up after people, and there was one final guy with his back to everyone else cooking. Luna, one of the women, cleaning up, breaths with shock. They all of course knew she was there weeks ago, but she hadn't interacted with any of them on a regular basis other than with Hunter and Jackson. If they did see her, she was always with Hunter, so they were apprehensive of approaching. "Isabella. Please," Isabella says, trying to sound confident but failing miserably. "What can we get for you? What do you want for breakfast, Luna?" Another woman asks with the brightest, greenest eyes Isabella had ever seen. "Call me Isabella," she repeats as politely as possible. "And I'm not hungry, but could you point me in the direction of the coffee?" Isabella smiles awkwardly. She didn't want servants, she wanted a pack. A family. "I could make it, Isabella." The first woman pipes up, straining to say Isabella's name like it pains her to say it. "I'm not Voldemort," Isabella thinks to herself, but she realized that in a normal pack the alpha would usually be titled as that and not their name. It was even more important for them to do it for Isabella and Hunter because they were royalty, but Isabella stuck by her guns, wanting them to call her by her name. "No, honestly, I'd like to do it. I just need to know where to go," Isabella replies, smiling. As nice as these women were, she really needed to find pack members her own age because she gathered her and Leila wouldn't be sharing clothes and painting each other's nails for a while. Louis can help you. He's a whiz in the kitchen and knows where everything is. A third older woman smiles, nodding her head towards the extremely tall guy who was bent over the stove cooking. Ma, I have to go and train. The man sighs, turning round to throw a glare at the third woman who is apparently his mother. You promised, she chuckles, walking to his side. Yeah, and there always seems to be more people on my cooking day than any others at this time. He sulks but continues with what he is doing. That because you're the best and they want your cooking before you go off and train. Men have to take part too. Not just women. His mother grinned before pressing a kiss to his cheek before walking off. Ma! He yells, wiping his cheek furiously but with a small smile on his face, while Isabella just watches the scene with a grin on her face. This is how she wished her life had been. Isabella starts, but he interrupts her. Isabella, I heard. He smirks before wiping his hands on his pants before holding out a hand for her to shake, which she does. Louis starts, but Isabella interrupts him this time. Louis, I heard, she smirks straight back. I like you, Louis says before throwing his head back to laugh. This friendship thing was a piece of cake. In the end, Jackson, who had been running the training session, had to come in and drag Louis away from Isabella. They had an instant friendship connection and they had spent the best part of 20 minutes just laughing at each other. Less than 2 minutes after Jackson had demanded Louis go outside to train, with a grin of his own sent in Isabella's direction as a sorry and a hello, Leila had appeared almost as if out of the shadows, like she had been waiting until she could get Isabella on her own. You said you'd tell me today. She mutters from behind Isabella, making her jump. Oh. Hi, Leila. Yes, I can tell you, but not here. Isabella shudders at the thought of the whole pack finding out about her past. Let's go out and get breakfast, Leila says with a sweet smile. Although Isabella had wanted to trust her, there was something that stopped it. I'm not hungry, Isabella muttered, trying to unnoticeably look around for an escape. Well, I am. Leila smirks in a sinister way. I'll go and tell Hunter then, Isabella says, standing up, but Leila grips her arm. One of you ladies can tell him when he wakes up, can't you? I knocked on the door before to tell him and he shouted at me. He's in a foul mood, so don't bother him before he wakes up and comes down himself, Leila says, shouting orders to the women and men left in the kitchen, who nod numbly, wanting to oppose but are too scared to. Without an excuse not to go, Isabella follows Leila out of the house and climbs into the car beside her. Something is telling her this is not going to be a normal breakfast. This used to be my favorite place when I lived around here, Leila says, eyeing up a building on the outskirts of town. To Isabella, it looked shady, but she didn't want to hurt Leila's feelings when she gave off the impression that she was just starting to trust her. Isabella couldn't find any words to say to Leila, so she simply nodded with a small smile on her face, but it quickly drops. They'd do anything for me. Plenty of things have happened here that never got revealed, Leila adds with a sadistic, fear-inducing smile. It's good that you have friends like that, Isabella forces out despite her mouth being so dry. Each word is like chewing on sandpaper. They both walk through the door of the small cafe. Although the exterior of the building is dirty enough to cloud the windows so that you had to get up real close to see through them, the interior was much cleaner and more welcoming, much to Isabella's relief. There were around 10 square tables with 2 chairs at each. They each had a flower in the middle and condiments scattered around. You sit, I'll order, Leila commands. I don't know what I want, Isabella mutters, feeling like a child, a feeling she knew all too well. There was a sick feeling in the pit of Isabella's stomach that had been rising throughout the time she had woken up till now. She wasn't sure if it was because she didn't trust Leila or because she was nervous about revealing things she would much rather stay in the past. You sit, I'll order, Leila repeated. Isabella thought it easier not to argue, so just complied and went to sit down at a table next to the windows. Isabella's jaw dropped in amazement. From the inside she could see outside of the cafe onto the small, empty street with perfect vision. There was no cloudy sight like there was from the outside of the cafe. Despite this being something that amazed Isabella, the feeling of unease grew as she wondered what type of cafe would need this feature. It's just a simply spelled by a witch, a voice says, making Isabella's head spin round so quick she was left momentarily dizzy. It had only come from Leila, but Isabella was so on edge. Everyone and everything had become a threat. Witches? Here? Isabella asks, her eyes widening. No, in this country they mostly reside in Scotland. Don't ask why. Must be the Highlands and stuff, but one particular which owed the owner Charlie a favor, so we managed to persuade her to do as we asked. Leila grins. Isabella was starting to wonder whether she herself was going crazy because every word that fell out of Leila's mouth sounded like a threat. "Oh" is all Isabella could manage to splutter out of her mouth. The two girls had been sat in the same spot for half an hour before Isabella knew she had to bring up the past. She had to tell Leila what Finn was really like. She had to make her understand that the person she should love and trust most in the world could not be trusted. To do this, Isabella would have to share her darkest secrets with a girl she scarcely knew or trusted. "Okay, so I was bonded as a baby. We never figured out why my parents did this, but they did. Luckily, the alpha of the pack house doors I was left at was a kind and loving man. A man who had always wanted a daughter to match his 3 sons, one of whom had been born not 3 months before. His wife also welcomed me with open arms and raised me as one of her own. Even I could barely tell that I didn't truly belong by blood because they treated me so well. I was brought up with a mother and father who loved me and 3 brothers. They all had some kind of jealousy towards me, but for the most part it was normal. One brother would be the alpha once his father died, the eldest. One would, with the right training, would be a pack warrior, and the final and youngest son Finn would rule by his brother's side. Not with a beta title, but close enough. Isabella starts. Leila, who she suspected to be interesting and wanting to know what she had to say, looked as though she couldn't care less. "Anyway, my father died when I was a teenager. At first I was treated like I always had done, as an equal, but the second the eldest son became alpha I was kicked, literally, to the bottom of the pile. Nobody helped me or pitied me, even though I had always done my best to be friendly and kind. I think this was mainly because they were scared. They had been threatened by the brothers that they themselves or their closest loved ones would be hurt if they gave me any kind of help, but within 3 months this was normal practice. It was like a switch. Suddenly everyone hated me even though I'd done nothing wrong. I could live with this, though. I could live with being the pack cleaner, with not having to talk to anyone. I could do it all, but the final brother, the youngest brother Finn, he was the thing I couldn't live with. He had always been the most jealous because of our small age difference, so he made up for all them years of jealousy in a short amount of time just because he could. Daily I was kicked, punched, and even stabbed. In a human case I would be lucky because I would die. I was wishing for death, but I have always had even faster healing than normal, so it was constant. It was always happening and there was nothing I could do to stop it." Isabella pauses to glance up at the slightly more interested girl across from her. Leila had reached out and taken the rose from the slim vase in the middle of the table, and was proceeding to rip each petal from it. "One day, about 4 months after my father had died, I was in Finn's room cleaning. I had just finished making the bed and doing one final glance around the room when he suddenly appeared as if from nowhere. I had kept my head down, grabbed everything I needed and headed out of the room. I was inches from the threshold of the door when he called me back. He didn't like the way I had positioned the pillows, even though it was the same as I had been doing it for a month. He punched me so hard in the stomach that I was completely winded. I couldn't breathe, but he didn't care. He grabbed me by the hair because I couldn't even stand up straight, and he dragged me to the bed. He ripped the pants right off of me. I was screaming and crying, and he didn't care. Nobody cared because nobody came to help me. They continued with their day-to-day lives like they couldn't hear me pleading for help. They did it every time. They didn't come and help no matter what happened. They didn't even care that he took out his knife and carved shapes onto my body that will never leave. Hell, they didn't even care when he thought he'd finally done it. When he thought he'd finally killed me. And do you know what he did?" Isabella yells, noticing that her voice level was rising and the stream of tears falling down her face were coming thicker and faster. Isabella had never talked about this with anyone, and she told herself if she ever did it would be with someone she loved and trusted. Something she didn't feel either about for Leila. Leila, however, continued to look bored. She had nearly pulled off all the petals from her red rose, and Isabella couldn't help but think it represented the time she had left to convince Leila what a bad person Finn was. "What did the bad man do?" Leila asks, pouting, faking concern about Isabella's past. "He took me deep into the forest and left me there, hoping that some animal would come and take me away. Luckily I managed to heal. Of course this isn't everything, but you need to understand just some of the bad things that Finn has done, and I know you don't think that is his name, but it is. I will never ever forget that face. I know we haven't known each other long, but you need to trust me on this, Leila." Isabella pleads, reaching out to take Leila's hands in her own, but Leila quickly moves her hands away. "There are less than 10 petals left now. Why wouldn't you leave?" Leila asks, shaking her head in disbelief, totally disregarding what she had just been told. "Where could I go? I struck lucky as a baby because I was innocent, so a pack took me in. Most packs these days are so nervous about rogues that they would rather kill someone on the spot without getting to know what they are doing. Sometimes I thought it would be worth the risk to get out of there, but then I got too scared of the uncertainty. I sometimes thought it must be my fault because they had turned so suddenly. Maybe I had done something, and if I stayed a little longer then they would be okay with me again. That's how he will make you feel. Maybe it is your fault. Leila shrugs, looking up from her now almost empty rows. What? Isabella says, clearly taken aback. Maybe it is your fault, she says, clearly pronouncing every single word. So you're saying you believe what I say about it being Finn, but yet you question whether it could be my fault? I don't need to stay here and listen to this. Your brother saved me from something I was sure to be the rest of my life. I was there because I had to be. Because I forced to be. Don't you willing walk into that, because you will end up dead, Isabella says, and with that she stands up and walks towards the doors, but as she reaches out to open it she notices that it is locked. Spinning back around she sees Leila throw the stem onto the floor before stepping on it. She walks slowly like an animal tracking its prey towards a frightened Isabella. Well, one thing was clear, Leila was using the same tactics as Finn. I brought you here today because I needed an excuse to get out of the house so I could leave, but I also needed to leave a message with someone for Hunter. That's if he finds you first. Leila cackles, walking across the room until she is in front of Isabella. Leila, you don't need to do this. Please don't put yourself in danger, Isabella pleads. Leila's fist quickly connects to Isabella's jaw, making her crumple to the floor, clutching it as pain throbs through her whole skull. Finn is outside. He's waiting for me, so tell my brother dearest not to follow us. Leila grins, sending her foot into Isabella's ribs. She couldn't help but thinking no matter how many times this happens, the feeling of broken ribs never gets easier as she hears her ribs crack. As if by magic, the front door to the cafe opens, and as Isabella is about to fall out of consciousness, the lack of abuse since being with Hunter had certainly lowered her pain tolerance. Despite the black spots filling her vision, Isabella screams and crawls slowly away from the door as stood there is none other than Finn holding a gun. What are you doing? Leila shrieks, looking from the gun to Isabella's curled up body. Giving the bitch what she deserves. I'm going to kill her, then take her body and put it on a pole and wave it around like a flag for her mate and the rest of the world to see. He smirks, pointing the gun at Isabella, but Leila quickly jumps in front of it. No, I won't let you. I mean, we don't need her. If you do something like that, then my brother is going to come after us. Leila panics, breathing heavily as if she had just ran a marathon. Good, I want him to come after us, he says, his smirk growing before pushing Leila to the side. The sharp bang of the gun happens, but then everything seems to go in slow motion. Isabella watches the small bullet, then a second come towards her small body. As they end her left thigh and stomach, no sounds come out of her mouth. She seems totally incapable of sounds, but she does hear muffled sound from the direction of her shooter. Leila screaming, Finn laughing. As Leila runs towards Isabella, Finn scoops her up in his arms and drags her out of the cafe. He is on his way back to collect Isabella when someone Isabella noticed from the pack as one of Finn's closest friends comes running into the room with bright red cheeks. He's here, we need to leave. Leave the girl, he yells before they both run out of the cafe. The last thing Isabella sees before her world goes dark is Hunter skidding onto his knees beside her body. Even then she couldn't help but force a small smile on her face despite the small trickles of blood leaving either side of her mouth. Bella! Isabella, please don't leave me, he pleads as tears fall from his face. He leans his head down onto Isabella's chest as if praying for her to be okay, but she sees no more as she falls into unconsciousness. The last thought Isabella had was, is Leila good or bad? 21. Pacing back and forth, Hunter doesn't take his eyes off of his pale mate, who hadn't moved once in the 24 hours since he had found her with 2 gunshot wounds. Nobody could explain why Isabella wasn't healing. Until her run-in with Leila and Finn, she had no injuries from living with her old pack. They had all healed and she was eating properly, so she was as healthy as she could be apart from not mating with Hunter, but they were still living together. It wasn't as if Hunter had rejected her, because that would have made them both weak. Hunter growls at the thought of rejecting Isabella, but he soon calms down with he stops at the top of the bed to run the back of his hand against her soft cheek that lacks the usual glow of color. Slumping down on the chair beside her bed, Hunter rests his head in his hands as his eyes beg him to let them shut. He hadn't slept in what felt like forever because he didn't want to miss any progress that Isabella made, but it just wasn't happening. Isabella's wounds were still completely open, but there was nothing stuck in them to prevent them from healing. In normal werewolves, they would have healed by now, but it just wasn't happening. Every theory that had been presented to Hunter had quickly been debunked because there was a factor that didn't fit in with Isabella's case, and with every theory, Hunter was getting more and more frustrated. He was taking things out on people who were completely innocent, but he had to do his best to keep his mind off of Leila and Finn because otherwise he would have chased after them, hunted them down and killed them, but it was Isabella that needed him right now. Just as Hunter was falling into a light sleep, he was abruptly woken up as the sliding glass door to Isabella's room was opened. He once again growled, but the person in front of him didn't flinch. "Oh, be quiet and listen to what the doctor has to say. It might help." 𝐿𝐴𝐺𝐺𝐻𝐿 mutters, rolling his eyes. The rudeness of how Jackson was treating actually felt good. Sometimes Hunter wanted people to talk back. He wanted to be reminded that he was still a member of society other than just the king of werewolves, and he was always sure to be able to rely on his best friend to do that. Luckily, Jackson knew when he could and when he couldn't do this with Hunter. He was one of the only people who could read Hunter and his mood so well. Stood behind Jackson was the doctor, who had a nervous look on his face. The last time he had spoken to Hunter, he was pushed forcefully out of the room and screamed at not to come back until he knew what was wrong with Isabella and how to fix it. "Doctor, you think you know what is wrong with your Luna?" Hunter asks, raising his eyebrows when he says Luna, to remind the doctor how serious this case was. "I have a good idea. You see, you are both stronger when mated. I am under the impression that you have not marked or mated yet." The doctor asks, coughing to hide the awkwardness in his voice. "Yes," Hunter replies, nodding curtly. "Well, simply meeting your mate has tided you both over for the time you have known each other, but since you haven't followed on with the next stages of the mating process, you are both weak, but you don't feel it. We only find this out when one of you is injured, like our Luna. By not marking her or mating with her, it is almost going through the rejection process, so you're going backwards and not forwards, so she is too weak to heal," the doctor explains, apprehensively biting his lip, waiting to see what the reaction is going to be from Hunter. "Okay, so how do we help her then?" Hunter asks, continually looking from Isabella to the doctor. He just needed her better, whatever the costs. There have been very little cases of this happening. As you know, the mating process is usually over very quickly. And if it isn't normal, werewolves aren't likely to be injured while not mated after meeting them, so the quickest way to help our Luna is to mark her, the doctor says, looking even more nervous but confident with his explanation and solution to the problem. "But Isabella wouldn't want me to. She'd feel so betrayed," Hunter mutters, thinking of the pros and cons in his head of doing this. If we left her without this, she could take weeks or months to heal and regain consciousness, or she might not wake up at all due to her being so weak, the doctor says, but Hunter has already made his mind. "Let's do it. I want us to be on our own though," Hunter explains, shooing the other two men out of the room with his hands. "Call us back in when you're ready, bro." Jackson grins, clearly very confident with this solution. Putting his hand on the back of Isabella's neck, Hunter lifted her small body up just enough to slide under her. He lay her back down between his legs so her head was just below his shoulder, giving him enough room to get to her neck. "I don't know if you can hear me in there, Bella, but if you can, I know you're freaking out right about now. If you can hear me now, you probably heard what the doctor said, so you know what's about to happen. If I could have done this any other way, I would have done. I wanted to be comfortable. I wanted it to be romantic, so you felt a fraction of the love I feel for you at the most. I wanted you to be awake so I could see your big, beautiful eyes." Hunter starts. He looks down at his mate's body in his arms. He lets out an awkward chuckle, expecting her face to break out into a grin like this was some big joke, but it didn't. Isabella stayed perfectly still. "If I could ensure that you would be okay and you would be awake soon, I might have let it happen naturally, but I need you, Isabella. I need to know you're safe, and if breaking your trust is the way to do it, then I just hope you'll be able to forgive me. You're going to be so angry. I know no matter what's happened in your past that you don't want to die, but you're going to be blindsided with anger because I did this, but I want you to know that I did it out of love because I love you, Isabella Montgomery. I'm going to do it now," Hunter says, but as he leans closer to Isabella's neck, he pauses and pulls back. He couldn't do it. "I'm scared, Isabella," Hunter sighs. He was shocked at himself for even admitting that. "I don't want you to hate me. My worst fear is me having to continue in this life without you. And that's why I have to do this, so that you don't leave me. Of course, I've never been marked, so I don't know from experience what it's like, but I did ask my mom when I was younger. She said it hurt at first, but then it was like every nerve was on fire. She felt so much better. She felt everything, especially the love she felt for my dad, so I hope this works for us. Maybe you being like this will mean you don't feel the pain, which would be good because I never want to hurt you." I also asked her what it felt like to have a mate, and she could barely put it into words, but when she did, it was with long and complicated words I didn't even think were possible for one person to feel for another, but I get it now. I get it with you, Bella, so please understand why I did this and just remember that I love you. And with that, Hunter sinks his teeth into Isabella's neck. At once her body convulses as if realizing what has happened because she had no pre-warning as she was unconscious, but then when he pulls away, her fragile body was still limp in his arms. Hunter felt more alive than ever, and it was true. The tingles he had once felt when in contact with Isabella's skin was nothing compared to the borderline pain/pleasure feelings he was getting now. It was the most intense thing he'd ever felt. Hunter managed to keep himself in control as he pulled Isabella further onto his lap to rock them from side to side slowly, while he hummed an unknown song into her slightly frizzy hair before falling into a light sleep for the first time since he had found her. 22. Isabella woke up with a start. She wasn't sure where she was, and the bright white surroundings were making her already pounding head hurt even more. Everything she knew felt like some sort of dream, so she wasn't sure what was real, but the tingles enclosing her body let her know one thing for sure. Hunter was holding her in his arms. Tingles since meeting Hunter had become a normal and expected thing for both of them, but Isabella couldn't help but notice they had become stronger since waking up, but she had put it down to being unconscious for however long she had been. Isabella had been drifting in and out the whole time she has been unconscious. Although she couldn't move a muscle or make a sound, she could hear things before slipping back into complete darkness. It had felt like a lifetime had passed. Stretching out her limbs, Isabella had an uncomfortable feeling on her neck, something wet and sticky that made her skin crawl. Reaching out to place her fingers against her neck, she cringes before pulling them quickly away again to reveal the tips of her fingers covered in her own red blood. Jumping up with such force left Isabella's head pounding and spinning. How she didn't pass out she will never know, and she couldn't understand why it hadn't woken up a still deeply sleeping Hunter, but after a quick glance back to make sure he was actually still breathing, she continued to the bathroom that was attached to the room. Well, Isabella hoped it was the bathroom. Luckily it was the bathroom, and as if a switch went off in Isabella's head, she realized how much she needed the toilet, so the inspection of her neck would have to wait. As she was sat there, a drop of blood fell from her neck to her stomach onto her nightgown, which made her panic. She jumped up from the toilet and ran to the mirror. There, in front of her eyes, were teeth marks. She'd been marked, he'd marked her, and she was furious. Before she could even take another step, a shooting pain shot its way through Isabella's stomach, and when she looked down, the small speck of blood on her nightgown began to grow and spread like she had been shot. Good, I want him to come after us, said the familiar, menacing voice of Finn. This was it, this was how she was going to die, alone without anyone who loved her, without Hunter. The ringing of the gun filled everyone's ears as the bullet sliced through the air at an unstoppable rate. It was only slowed as it came into contact with Isabella's body. It went through her body, leaving a hole, tearing its way through her muscles, shattering a rib and letting blood go in places it should not. Isabella's mouth opened to scream, but it would not come. It was as if all the breath in her body had disappeared out of the hole created by the bullet that was still traveling through her body until it eventually left out of another hole in her back. Bella! Isabella! Isabella! Shouted that oh so familiar voice. She felt a shaking of her shoulders, but she was still in a dream world, transported back to that day whenever it was when Finn had attempted to take her life yet again. Coming back to her senses, Isabella noticed she was stood rigid in the middle of the bathroom with Hunter's hands placed on either arm, shaking Isabella to get her to realize where she was. Tears were also streaming down her face. She was breathless and her voice was hoarse. I was there. He was there. And remembering what she had seen before, she gasped before pulling aggressively away from Hunter to look down at her stomach, but there was nothing but the same small speck of blood from earlier. But there was, Isabella explains, narrowing her eyes. It was just a flashback, Isabella, you're safe now. You're with me, Hunter explains, pulling Isabella back into his arms for a bear hug. For a moment, Isabella feels safe, but then she continues to remember what happened before her flashback. Before ripping away from Hunter again to touch her neck, she pulls it away and an even smaller amount of blood is left on her fingers as the wound is healing. You marked me? She accuses, even though she already knows the answer. I had to. You might not have got better. We tried different things, but they weren't working, Hunter explains with hurt in his eyes. You knew that it was important to me. I wanted to do it properly, romantically, Isabella whispers, her lip quivering. Romantic? Do you want to know what my idea of romance is? Loving someone who is alive, which you might not have been had I not marked you. Hunter yells angrily, but with hurt in his eyes, which he quickly hides away. But you've always given me a choice and you took this choice away from me, one of the most important choices I have, and I wasn't able to make it. Isabella sighs. She knew she was being selfish because he was only trying to save her life, but she had grown used to making these choices. She never wanted to have it taken away from her again. And yet it had, even by someone who loved her. You know what? Next time I'll just leave you to die then, Hunter yells before leaving the bathroom. Isabella only knew where he had gone when she heard the glass door of the hospital room slam shut. It was only then that Isabella moved back into the room and climbed on her bed with mixed emotions. The door flung open and Isabella was hopeful that Hunter had come back, but it only revealed Jackson, who looked amused but bewildered. What is going on? I thought Hunter would be happy as Larry for weeks on end, but yet he's stomping about there with a right face on him, Jackson says with a slight smile which quickly disappears when he notices the look on Isabella's face. He marked me, I couldn't even give my consent and yet he marked me, Isabella explains with her lip quivering again. She was almost certain that Jackson would already know of what Hunter had done, but she told him anyway because she trusted him with her problems. He did that because... Jackson starts, but Isabella interrupts him. I know he didn't know if I'd wake up without it, but... Oh, I don't know, it just wasn't what I expected to happen now I've met Hunter. Isabella shrugs, feeling like a child, but she just couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal away. I don't know whether I am psychic or you two are predictable, but... Jackson sighs while Isabella watches him cross the room. He opens the drawer beside the bed that Isabella was sat on and pulls out a recorder. You recorded? Isabella was lost for words. Bloody good job too, isn't it? Jackson shrugs with the grin back on his face while he presses play. I don't know if you can hear me or not in there. 23. Isabella listening to the recording again and again, feeling the worst she could have possibly ever felt. She already knew before listening to it that she was being selfish, but she was so blinded by anger and upset about not having a say in the option that feeling had been masked. But the second she started that recorder she knew her feelings were about to change, and she was right. Feeling terrible, all Isabella wanted to do was go and find Hunter, but at the same time, she couldn't get her body to move for a long time, so she was left replaying the recording again and again. Eventually, Isabella was able to swing her legs out of the bed. Only dressed in a hospital gown, Isabella leaves the hospital wing of the pack house and goes in search of Hunter. Along the way, pack members can't help but try and speak to Isabella to tell her how happy they are that she is okay. Despite wanting to be polite, Isabella had to shrug them off as quickly as possible so she can get to Hunter. What the hell are you doing out of bed? Jackson sighs when he spots Isabella wandering aimlessly around the pack house. He takes in the way she is dressed and shakes his head, knowing that Hunter won't be happy. You could just tell me where he is so less people have to see me like this. Isabella grins, pointing at herself. Office, he says with a slight smile. I've decided I'm going to change my name. He adds quickly, making her turn back around from the direction she was heading in. Huh? She asks, raising her eyebrows in confusion. Cupid, I'm going to change my name to Cupid, gonna get myself a bow and arrow and go shooting people to make them fall in love. He grins, to which Isabella bursts out laughing at. Okay. Cupid, she laughs before leaving him stood there with a big grin on his face. Isabella knocks on Hunter's office door. She wanted to do things by the book, not because she was worried that he was having a meeting, but she didn't want to give him another excuse to be angry at her. And if she had just burst into the room, he could have been pissed with her. Come in, shouts that familiar voice, gruff with annoyance. When Isabella first walks in, Hunter has an annoyed look on his face to match his voice, but it melts away when he sees who is at the door. Isabella, you should be in bed, Hunter replies, standing up, but before he can step towards Isabella, she runs up to him and launches herself at him to kiss him. Despite her small frame, the shock nearly knocks Hunter off of his feet. Slumping down into his chair with Isabella on his lap, he clutches her face in his large hands while she reaches down and pulls off his shirt. Hunter moves his hands from Isabella's face to touch every inch of her body. The lack of this form of contact had been driving Hunter insane, but he'd never experienced it quite like this before. Luckily, Hunter comes to his senses and pulls away from Isabella, who looks crestfallen. Isabella, Hunter starts breathlessly, we need to stop. He replies, sucking in as much air as he can while trying to not have physical contact, as he knew he would lose control. We don't need to stop. I don't want to stop, Isabella replies with the highest level of confidence she'd ever had, despite her legs feeling like jelly. Me either, but not now, and certainly not here. I want it to be special, Bella. Not just because we've had a fight, Hunter replies with a sigh. I guess so, Isabella shrugs. She really did feel ready. She understood how much they both loved each other, and finalizing the mating process seemed like the right thing to do, but she knew he was right. Tonight is the only thing Hunter says while Isabella raises her eyebrows. If you really think you're ready, Isabella. Tonight. He winks. I'm ready, she whispers nervously. Go to our room, pick out some clothes for a couple of days, go back to the hospital wing and see the doctor. Make sure everything is okay for you to go on a little break, then stay there until I pick you up at 8. I want to make sure you're not going to collapse on me. He grins, but he himself looks nervous. And put this on, Hunter quickly adds after Isabella stands up. He picks up his t-shirt that Isabella had taken off and throws it to her. A t-shirt is more covering than a hospital gown. I think I need words with them doctors, Hunter says more to himself. I don't plan to be in there often, so you have nothing to worry about. Isabella grins. She couldn't believe how confident she felt, but she was planning on taking advantage as long as she could. No, you'd better never put me through that again. He sighs, walking over to pull Isabella into his chest to hug her. I won't, he simply replies, taking in his calming scent. Tonight, baby. He grins before pushing her softly out the door. Trying to get rid of me, Mr. Alpha? She grins. I have a lot to plan for. He smirks before pressing one last kiss to Isabella's lips before closing the door. It was as if not being in the presence of Hunter, all of the confidence left her body, and she couldn't believe she had actually agreed to go away with Hunter for that one sole purpose of mating with him. Yet despite this, Isabella found herself doing exactly as Hunter has asked her to do. 24. Isabella was packed up and ready to leave around 10 times. Each time she thought she was ready, but then she wanted to add something. She unpacked it all again to repack it. She wanted everything to be perfect, as this was going to be one of the most important nights of her life. For werewolves, marriage was pretty important, especially for alphas and lunas, as the official bonding ceremony for the whole pack to witness, but the mating process was considered more important between the two mates. To actually create the bond between them, werewolves did things backwards. You had to finish the mating process, which of course involved having sex before you could get married. Not owning any nice underwear, Isabella panicked at the ones she had packed. They were not the slightest bit attractive, but she has packed numerous pairs of black panties. You don't buy black underwear if you don't want anyone to see it. Isabella also showered, making sure to smother herself with a strawberry-scented body wash. She washed her hair multiple times and scrubbed her body. Not only did she want to look and smell nice, but while she has been unconscious, she hadn't been able to have a shower, so it was as if she could feel the dirt on her skin. When she came out of the bathroom, Isabella noticed a box on the bed with a note on top. Picking it up, she could even smell Hunter's scent, so it instantly made her smile. Dearest Bella, I hope you don't mind that I made reservations for dinner, and I picked out your outfit. It's in the box if you hadn't already guessed. Wear it and I don't want any complaints. You're going to look beautiful. See you at 8 p.m. princess. Yours, Hunter X. Heart swooning, she opened the box and practically melted right there on the spot. Boy has taste. The dress was beautiful, and there was even jewelry and shoes to match. Dresses were not something that Isabella wore often, and Hunter knew that, which was why he told her not to complain, but she had to agree that it was beautiful. It was simply which Isabella liked, because she didn't want too much attention to be drawn to herself. The dress was a champagne color that was very floaty on the arms and skirt, but pinched in at the waist to accentuate Isabella's body shape perfectly. It came to knee level, which was where Isabella felt most comfortable in the first dress Hunter was going to see in her that he had picked out. Isabella dried her hair and instantly put the dress on, but sat at the vanity table. She couldn't help but scrutinize the way she looked. Her hair seemed too limp and bone straight. Her makeup was too simple. She wanted to wow the man she loved, especially in such a gorgeous dress, yet it wasn't going right, and she didn't know why. It was 6:30 and Isabella still needed to get dressed and go and speak to the doctor. She should have done that first, as if he turned around and said she was best not going. There was no way Hunter would take her away. A knock at the door startled Isabella, but the silence from her prompted the person outside to speak. Sorry, Luna. I'm just here to pick up a bag. The Alpha sent me up to get your bag. A small voice calls out. Whoever this person was sounded nervous. Hunter had likely turned to the first person he saw to do his dirty work for him. Feeling sorry for the girl, Isabella opened the door widely and let her in. With a small smile, she stepped over the threshold and headed to the bed where Isabella pointed that her bag was. One thing Isabella noticed about the girl was that despite being nervous to communicate with words, she expressed herself in the way she looked. She seemed simple and yet so beautiful. Much like the dress that Isabella was not pulling off at all. "Your hair is beautiful," Isabella mutters shyly. "Oh, thank you, I love yours if I'm honest," she says back, which Isabella waves off. "You're just saying that. My hair is flat and boring and my makeup is exactly the same, but yours is so nice," Isabella explains with a frustrated sigh. "I could help you if you'd like?" She smiles. Isabella felt wary about who she could trust, because they wanted to be friends or because of the power status they would gain for being in the Luna Queen's personal circle of friends, but since she has made the first move, Isabella decided that this girl was safe. "I would like that a lot," Isabella replies. She has never felt so relieved about getting help for the way she looked. Dropping the bag by the door, the girl walked over to where Isabella had resumed sitting. She examined Isabella's belongings. The small amount of makeup was more than has ever had in her life, and that was because Hunter had gone and got her the bare minimum, even though he complained that she didn't need it. "Wait here, Luna, I have the perfect products. I won't be a minute," she grins before rushing off. Isabella already knew she was going to like this girl. Isabella had found a lot out about the girl in front of her. For starters, her name was Ava. She, like Isabella, hadn't been born into the pack, she had been brought here because her mate lived here. Unless either partner in the mating process had a high position in their pack, they could choose where they lived, but more often than not, it was expected that the girl went to the boys' pack. Ava had gotten to the pack 3 weeks before Isabella had, and only had a very small knit groups of friends, including her mate named Jack, another male friend called Tom. She made it clear that Jack was okay with them being friends because he was gay, a girl named Steph and another girl named Olivia. They were pretty invisible in the pack and loved spending time in the TV room, where they binge-watched TV series and films, which Isabella was now invited to whenever she wanted some company. A firm friendship had been made in the time it had taken for Ava to do Isabella's makeup and curl her hair into loose waves. Finally, Isabella had gone to the hospital wing of the pack house to speak to the doctor, who had reluctantly agreed that she could go away for a couple of days as long as she promised to tell Hunter any signs of feeling unwell, and the second they got back to the pack house, no matter the time she had to go and get the doctor to check her over. He also said it had to be personally him because he didn't want anyone skipping corners when checking her over, so Isabella prayed that when her and Hunter did get back, he would be on shift. She would feel terrible if she had to wake him up. "Everything okay, Doc?" Hunter says, making Isabella jump as he wrapped his arms around her stomach and rested his head on her shoulder. "Yep, she isn't 100%, but I believe that she is well enough for a couple of relaxing days away. It is likely to do her a lot of good, but she has promised to tell you of any times that she isn't feeling good, and the second you get back she comes to see me, okay? I know you will make sure she does. I don't usually disclose what I have discussed with a patient, but I'm sure you know you have a stubborn mate, so I want you to make sure she follows doctor's orders," he explains, making Isabella feel like a child, but in her own head, Isabella knew he was doing the right thing. "Don't you worry, I'll make sure she comes to you when we get back," Hunter grins before walking around the side of the bed to stand in front of Isabella. He soaked her appearance in with a huge grin on his face. "I knew you'd look amazing in that dress. Your hair and makeup looks good too," he compliments. Who knew he would notice such things? "Thanks, I may have had a little help." Isabella grins at the little secret of making a new friend. Hunter raised his eyebrows but didn't question it further. It was probably because he was almost certain that a girl would have been the one to do it. As they were walking out the door, Hunter was revealing no secrets about what they were going to do over these couple of days, or even where they were going. "Isabella!" shouts out a familiar voice. "Ava?" She smiles, turning around to see the running figure quickly coming towards her, which abruptly stops extremely close to her. "I love that dress." Glancing over at Hunter, Isabella could see the proud smirk on his face. "But I thought something was missing, then I remembered this. I don't wear it often enough for how beautiful it is, so I want you to wear it," Ava explains, draping the leather jacket over Isabella's shoulders, and she was right. It worked perfectly and completed the whole look. "I love it. Thank you." Isabella grins, pulling her newfound friend into a hug which shocked all three of them. "Have fun. Let's talk when you get back, and I'll introduce you to the guys." She smiles before turning quickly on her heel to walk away. "Guys?" Hunter frowns as he leads Isabella out of the door, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "She means guys as in friends. Calm down. You're the only man for me," Isabella grins, leaning into Hunter more. "You'd better believe it." He smirks before opening the car door for her to get in. "Where are we going? What restaurant?" Isabella smiles softly. "We're not going to a restaurant. We're going away to my log cabin a couple of miles outside the pack lines for a couple of days. You deserve it. He smiles. 25. Wait. Hunter says, placing an arm over Isabella's chest, making her stop in her tracks in front of the door of a log cabin at the side of a lake. Isabella instantly feels alarmed, but is quickly calmed when she sees a smile spread across Hunter's face. I need to carry you over the threshold. He smirks, raising his eyebrows. Isn't that after weddings? Isabella replies, narrowing her eyes at her playful mate. We're going to spend the rest of our lives together anyway, so we don't need a wedding. He says, placing one of his hands at the side of Isabella's face. Hunter starts to lean in, and the second that Isabella closes her eyes, expecting to feel his soft lips on hers any minute, she is scooped up and thrown over Hunter's shoulder in a fireman's lift as a squeal escapes her lips. I don't think this is what they meant when they said you're meant to carry me over the threshold. She giggles as a sharp slap is sent to her bottom. I am carrying you, and we are now over the threshold, he says knowingly as he steps from the outside inside. Smart arse, Isabella says jokingly as she takes in how beautiful the cabin is. Although it had all the most modern features, it still had a rustic looks to it. It was perfect. Fuck. Hunter curses, it's ruined. Whoa, what's wrong? Isabella replies, instantly on edge again. She couldn't get used to these quick changes. The electric isn't working. We're going to have to go home. This whole weekend has been ruined. I'm so sorry, I wanted it to be perfect. We have a fridge full of food that is bound to go off soon too, Hunter explains, flicking the light switch back and forth a couple of times to prove his point. Looking around the room for inspiration, Isabella notices the fireplace. A beautiful real wood burner. We don't need to go home. You go and get some wood for the fire and I will have it perfect by the time you get back. Isabella grins, feeling like an excited plan that Hunter has no idea about. Hunter looks unsure, but Isabella shoos him out the door as she goes and searches the house for everything she needed. Some of the food looked like it had seen better days, but she was able to make a feast fit for a king, an alpha king at that. She also pushed the couch closer to the fire so they had something to lean on before placing blankets on the floor to sit on. After she had completely decorated the room, it was safe to say she could happily fall asleep as it had wore her out, but luckily Hunter had returned a couple of minutes later. The excited look on Isabella's face was now mirrored on Hunter's face as he looked at the blankets, pillows, picnic basket and fair lights covering the room. Without saying a word, Hunter strides over to Isabella. He wraps his arms around her and pulls her to him so he can kiss her. He pushes his fingers through her hair as he deepens the kiss with ease. Hunter pulls away suddenly with a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, even though Isabella can see he is trying to be annoyed. You shouldn't have moved that couch, it's heavy and you're still not totally recovered, he worries, narrowing his eyes at her. Shut up and kiss me, she laughs. Shaking her head, she wondered how long it would take for him to notice. Yes ma'am, he smirks before kissing her again. You want some of this? Hunter asks, Isabella's head rising up and down every time he breathes. She could feel his heart beating against the side of her head and she never wanted to move again. Sure, she muttered, dragging her head up begrudgingly. Hunter held the glass to Isabella's lips and let her drink some before pulling it away, purposely causing some of the liquid to fall down Isabella's front. She instantly lifted her hand to wipe it away, but Hunter stopped her. Starting at the corner of her mouth, Hunter pressed his lips against her increasingly warm, flushed skin. He moved slowly to her chin, then down her neck as he transferred the wine from Isabella's skin to his lips, which he happily licked away. Frowning at the barrier of Isabella's dress, he looks up at her nervous face, but the small nod she shows gives Hunter the permission to remove the item of clothing, which he does gently, not even noticing the scars. He just sees the most beautiful girl in the world. I love you. He sighs happily, nuzzling his face against Isabella's neck. I love you too. She giggles, feeling suddenly drunk on happiness. Hunter proceeds to kiss down Isabella's body. When he first reaches her stomach, he feels her tense and he hears her take a deep, shaky breath in, which makes him want to move quickly, but he decides against it as he kisses her stomach even more to show her that he loves that part of her more than any other, as this was what made her the way she was. Perfect. Hunter knew Isabella would never like this part of her, but he could try to make her see. God, you're perfect. He mutters more to himself, but Isabella can't help but smile down at him. Isabella sits up with a surge of confidence. She takes the situation in her own hands as she grips Hunter's t-shirt and pulls it over his head with ease before pulling him back to her so she can kiss him. The kiss started off small and innocent, but it quickly became bigger and more intense. Every negative though Isabella had ever thought or experienced was now forgotten about as she pulled Hunter onto her as she lay down on the blankets and cushions below. Isabella wrapped her legs around Hunter's waist as he breaks the kiss to grin down at her mischievously before he worked on unclasping her bra. He looked deep into her eyes as he tenderly pulled it away from her body and threw it across the room, making her giggle before he kissed her again. Hooking her fingers over Hunter's waistband, Isabella pulled his pants and boxers off at the same time. There isn't even a second of embarrassment. Everything that was happening felt completely natural with Hunter. Then in a matter of a couple of seconds, Isabella's underwear was off and they were both exposed to each other. There was no going back now. This was it. Hunter's tongue ran against Isabella's bottom lip before he bit it lightly, making her gasp as her body filled with explosions from each nerve ending. Pulling away, Hunter positioned himself in between Isabella's legs. She suddenly felt too exposed and tried to cover herself up with her hands. "Don't be shy with me, Bella." He smiled softly, running his nose down the bridge of hers. She could have swore she saw a sparkle in his eyes. "I'm scared," she choked out, closing her eyes as her cheeks went beetroot red. "Look at me." He sighs, not moving an inch. Isabella had to be ready before he went any further. She had to want it as much as he did. Isabella's big eyes fluttered back open, taking Hunter's breath away momentarily. "We'll go slow. If this is what you want, we'll go at your pace, but if you aren't ready, don't be scared to tell me. If you're not ready, then we can stop now, but you need to tell me what you want. I'll love you whatever you choose." He smiles, rubbing his thumb back and forth over her cheek. "I want you, I want this," she replies, placing her hands on his forearms in preparation. Although there was a moment when Isabella felt as though she had made the wrong decision, all of a sudden it was perfect. She knew that they were made for each other. "Everything okay?" Hunter checks between comforting kisses. "Better than okay," she smiles. "Are you ready to finish this?" Hunter asks, glancing down at the almost finished mark on Isabella's neck. "This is the start, Hunter," Isabella grins. "Forever and always, baby." Hunter smiles back before biting down on the mark 27. Hunter had fallen asleep a long while ago, but Isabella was still wide awake with her head on his chest as they lay on the floor on the mountain of pillows and blankets. There was a thin blanket over them both, but Hunter's body head was enough to keep Isabella perfectly warm. She still couldn't wipe the grin off of her face. Everything had been perfect. Shifting slightly, Isabella couldn't help but stare at Hunter while he slept. His long dark eyelashes fluttering slightly in his sleep, his big, kissable lips just parted enough to let occasional small breaths escape. Isabella could have stayed there all night and just continued to list new things she loved about him, but he had barely slept since she has been in hospital, so he needed this. Isabella got up and pulled Hunter's t-shirt over her head before walking into the kitchen. Isabella sat down for a couple of minutes, but she felt too happy to sit still, so deciding to go for a walk, she then put on her Vans. Everything outside seemed to be in so much more focus now. Isabella knew that didn't make sense, but she just couldn't explain it. The color of grass was now more vibrant. The moon was brighter, and she felt like she could hear a conversation between two bugs. If she tried, the mating process really did make a difference. Not knowing where she was going, Isabella followed a pathway that led to a forest opening. "What is it with werewolves and forests?" Isabella muttered with a smile still stamped to her face. Walking deeper into the forest, Isabella found a patch of grass with no trees over the top. It was the perfect place to lay down and look at the stars. After laying there for about 20 minutes, Isabella could feel herself finally getting tired, but then a snap of a branch behind her brought her right to attention. Telling herself it was probably an animal, she tried to relax again, but further twigs snapping told Isabella this wasn't an animal. Or if it was an animal stalking its prey, and that's exactly what she was, its prey. She stood up quickly and was spinning round in circles so she could protect herself from any attacks. Out of the bushes came a figure that Isabella barely even recognized. It was a battered and bruised Leila. Isabella couldn't help the gasp that escaped her lips, and even after everything, she found herself walking towards the danger rather than running away from it like she knew she should. Isabella knew what it was like to be a slave of that monster. "What has he done to you?" she asks, tears filling her eyes. Isabella reaches a hand out to wipe a fresh cut on Leila's busted lip to remove the blood from her lip. He is coming for you," Leila says, almost like a robot. "I should shout him to tell him you're here. He is looking for you. He is coming for you." Isabella was horrified at what she saw in front of her. Finn had come close to breaking Isabella over the years, but he has never succeeded, and yet in a few short weeks, He had done it to Leila. The mating process definitely has its downfalls. Not everyone can be as lucky as Isabella and Hunter. I thought he loved me, Leila whispered, her voice cracking on almost every word. Come back with me, Leila. We will go to Hunter to get you help. We will get you away from him, Isabella says, holding out her hand as an open invitation. Leila considers taking it, but the conditioning Finn has put her through makes her step back. I can't live without Finn. He is my mate and I love him, she replies. Again sounding like a robot, he has literally beaten them words into her. You won't live much longer if you stay with him anyway. You have a better chance if you come with me, Isabella says with a comforting smile despite how horrified she felt on the inside. He is coming, Leila panics, twisting in all directions that Isabella had done moments before. You can't let him take me, Leila, he will kill me and you know he will. Despite everything, you're a good person and I know you love Hunter. Think of what would happen to him if I was killed. You would be responsible for your brother's death, Isabella says, knowing that she is being harsh to put that pressure on her, but she was desperate. Too late, he is coming for you, Leila says as a stray tear slips out of her eye. Make sure you scream, Leila adds as she walks up to Isabella. Scream loud so Hunter hears. And with that, Leila sends a sharp punch to Isabella's eye. Even when she was weak, it was a hell of a punch and Isabella couldn't help but scream at the pain that burst into her head. Scream loud. Hunter come, Leila explains in a monotonous voice. Run. That way, Leila says, pointing away from the direction of the cabin. But Isabella starts. Scream loud. Hunter come, run. That way, she repeats. Her lack of English skills terrified Isabella. She knew firsthand how bad Finn could be, but she didn't realize he could ever be capable of something like this with his own mate. One last look back, Isabella ran in the direction that Leila had told her to. The only thing she could do now was trust Leila and hope that Hunter found her in time. The bush cleared and Finn popped out of them with a crazed look in his eye. I heard her scream, he says in a menacingly calm voice. All Leila could do was nod and point in the direction slightly off course that Isabella should be on so that he would still smell her scent, but it should throw him off the track until Hunter found her. If you're wrong, I will kill you. Hunter will already be on his way, Finn growls. Leila stays facing forward, not letting her fear show. Yes, sir, she simply says in a shaky voice. She welcomed death now. It would be a blessing in disguise. Leila simply lay on the floor in the fetal position and waited for the repercussions of Finn's wrath. Despite the thumping headache, Isabella was able to run quite fast, but she quickly found herself at a dead end. Spinning back around, Isabella heard leaves rustling in the near distance. Panic filled her chest as she could see black spots from not getting enough oxygen. Falling to her knees, Isabella was doing all she could to force herself to breathe properly, but as the rustling got closer, she panicked even more. That was until she heard the voice she had been praying for. Isabella, what is happening? Hunter says in an equally panicked tone, lifting her chin up so he could look her over. She can see the anger in his eyes when he sees her already bruised and swollen eye. Leila, he growls. How did you know? Isabella splutters, still trying to breathe properly. It's her trademark thing to punch in the eye, and it always leaves this bruising and swelling. She's pushed it too far. I am going to kill both of them, he growls, and Isabella believes for a minute that he really would kill his own sister. She was helping me, Hunter. She punched me so I would scream so you would come. She told me where to run, so that I would be able to get away from Finn while I waited for you. Oh, Hunter. She is a mess. She is so broken. I don't know what he has done to her, Isabella sobs. She notices Hunter's eyes have glistened over with tears, but he holds them back as he scoops Isabella up in his arms as she cries into his chest. I have you now, you don't need to worry. I'm going to take you home, to our home back at the pack where you will be safe, he mutters, pressing a desperate kiss to her lips. We need to help her, Hunter. He will kill her. Promise you will find her before it's too late. I owe her my life, Isabella mutters, falling into an exhausted sleep. I promise, baby, Hunter replies, carrying on walking back towards the cabin, his heart still racing at the thought of losing his mate and his extremely annoying sister that he still loved.